At our community Seder on Friday night, we remembered the ancient story of the Jewish people's liberation from slavery under the Egyptians, and thereby remembered the centrality of freedom as an ultimate human right and liberation for all peoples everywhere. I remembered my immigrant grandparents, Romanian Jews on my dad's side, and my mom's side were Slovakian, Russian Orthodox, and today is their Easter. Christos Voskres, as my Baba would say. And I remembered how that generation wanted nothing more for us, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren, that we should have then, that we should have more than they did. Because they struggled for just the basics. They had nothing in some cases but the clothes on their back, often. My grandfather grew up sharing his bed with total strangers. His mother had a rooming house, and so he would go to sleep sometimes and wake up to find somebody's feet on the pillow next to him because they would pack them into one bed, head to, you know what I mean, like sardines. So he never knew. He left home at 15, ran away. So this refrain, "we want you to have more," was really a loving blessing. And I think, my God, how quickly things have changed, or should be changing, right? Because nowadays, what do responsible parents and grandparents say, who are from the middle classes and the educated people? We tend to say now, we hope you have much less than we do. We want you to be able to make do with so much less. I'm remembering a New Yorker cartoon I saw once that showed a man with his arm around a small boy, meant obviously to be his son, sadly gesturing toward a vista through the window of trees and a beautiful field and a running brook and gazelles leaping and deers coming out to nibble on the grass. And the caption says, "Someday, son, none of this will be yours." So sad. So sad, but you laugh because, in that way that we laugh at such true and sad and ironic realities. In the 18th century, so mid-1700s, the idea came to be by Enlightenment thinkers that humanity was co-creator of creation with God. And this was a really amazing evolution of thought, because prior to that time, and we're thinking, especially in the medieval era, and really just prior to that time in general, human beings' idea of God was that God was the creator and human beings were lowly, earthly, and beings who were very much in the hands of this all-powerful God. So it was really an evolution of thought to see humans as having agency and having this kind of influence in creation along with the Creator. So that was really very empowering to 18th century people, and that is in fact the era which strongly influenced Unitarian thought. But now we see the consequences of that reality. We are, in fact, co-creators with the divine. And we see that, in fact, that is not necessarily an empowering thing, but that in some ways humanity has kind of gone mad with that power. We've had this incredible rise in technological advances, and our energy use and our way of life has, of course, meant that resulted in us changing creation. So now when I use that phrase, we are co-creators, I think, and may we be humble, and may we be good stewards, and may we realize how much power we have as co-creators. This twister that just went through Kansas, the biggest that anybody has seen, and this climate change, the results of which we are obviously seeing in our own winter, and I don't need to go on, So we can become very hopeless. But I attended a retreat this week given by Episcopal priest and climate change activist Margaret Bullitt Jonas. And she's developed beautiful steps for spiritual people to use so that we may maintain hope in a time of crisis. And the steps that she talks about, and I'm just going to briefly outline them here. She talks about first having an awakened heart, which is that place of mindfulness and awareness, of being willing to follow the story, to follow the reality, and to not just be like, la, 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 I'll leave this to Mira's grandchildren to figure out, or I don't really want to deal with it, or I'm going to take tiny little steps and think that's all that matters, and generally just kind of live my life and be comfortable and have fun, because I'm not going to be here to see the real crisis. So the awakened heart is one that is mindful and aware. The second step in keeping hope alive while we remain aware of reality and stay active in working toward stewardship of the earth is what she calls the broken heart. And this is important, she says, because if we don't acknowledge our grief at what we are losing, then that just leads to more denial, and it leads to helplessness that then paralyzes us and we can't do anything. So acknowledging the brokenheartedness, to be in that place and say, that's what I feel today. That's an important part of spiritual integrity and authenticity, to give ourselves permission to sometimes be in that place. And the third step that Margaret Bullitt Jonas talks about is something that we should, she says, always be working toward, and that is what she calls the radiant heart. The openness to reality, but also so key in this step is a faithfulness that we are not the only ones doing the work. Not just are we not the only ones doing the work and caring in terms of our communities, but to remember the greater reality, the God reality, that is the energy of creation itself, to remember that is a renewing and eternal and unknowable force that we have to remember is also working, that we are not. There is a wonderful quote by Wendell Berry. It says, "Not by your will is the house carried through the night." And I know I say that to myself a lot when I feel like we have to do more. And to just remember there are a lot of people who care. There are many hands joined in the effort, and that we must also be faithful to what God is doing. So that way we stay open to loving the work and open to the process, holding it in a way that isn't devastating and overwhelming. And so you could also call this joyful engagement. So Margaret Bullitt Jonas says that this is a cyclical kind of series of steps, that you maybe have the radiant heart for a while and then you see something that breaks your heart again. And so you go back and you do the spiritual work of the broken heart and you say, I'm feeling this grief, So it's not a linear, always reaching toward the radiant heart and maintaining the radiant heart forever, because forget it. None of us can. We're not made that way. So we had this retreat, and then we all went out to our individual cars and drove home to our individual family homes and planned to get on jet planes to fly through thousands of miles to talk about divestment from fossil fuels. You know me by now. This is how I have that cynical brain that goes, oh, chug, chug, chug. And, and I thought, we're not going to get there in this generation. Obviously, there's just too many blind spots. But I thought about Mira, thought about that baby girl that we would be dedicating today. And I thought, well, you know what? We're going to help Mira and her generation. We're going to help our children. And how can we help our children in this new era, of being aware of what it means to be co-creators of reality with the ultimate? And I thought perhaps more than anything, we could teach our babies not to need so much privacy and private space and their own homes and their own individual cars and all of their own possessions, and not to see that as a success. The way that I was raised is, those are your goals and you're going to own these things or you're going to have these things. So that was one of the things I thought about, is just, maybe to help that generation and model it for them. I talk sometimes about retiring in a communal home with some colleagues. I'm looking at Peter right there, and we have kind of this fantasy of having like a UU ministers colony somewhere where we'll buy houses together, and Peter's like, we do? We do have that fantasy. And like hire somebody to take us all to our doctor's appointments, and really, because we can't maintain all of these big homes on our own. And so that's one thing, is to just encourage our children to think about communal living and sharing as just this awesome thing that they will have the ability to do, and to not be so benighted as we were. Another thing we can do is not to project our own grief onto that generation. It's very possible that Mira and her grandchildren, if she has some, or of that generation, will be much happier in a slower, more local, sustainable economy. With less choices, less stuff. Maybe they'll be less lonely. Maybe they'll have more reasonable expectations than we've had. And I just want to grab my smartphone and look at it and go, oh, the calendar, the expectations, the driving around. Maybe some of this climate crisis will create a new lifestyle that will actually be more gentle and beautiful and healthy for our children and their grandchildren. In the reading at the beginning of this service, Karen shared with us a tale from classical rabbinic literature from the mystical Kabbalah tradition. This may be the most helpful theological idea for Mira's generation, that within the brokenness of existence, although there is a shattering of the vessels of divinity within creation, that shattering becomes a blessing, a sharing of the divine essence that infests all people, all beings, and all things. We who are old and older than Mira must lift up that divine light within, so that we can do the work of tikkun olam, repairing the world, from a place of reverence and faithfulness, and not from fear. Amen.